like to introduce Dr. Elodie Strupetronsky. She is from Cibestat Querétaro, and she's a researcher there. She will be talking about artificial detective confinement for electrons and photons.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Karina and Neil and Mauricio, for inviting me. We are in such good company today. So today I thought I would talk to you about artificial effective confinement for electrons and photons. So as you will see, the research in our group focuses on a very interesting part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is located exactly where electronic devices stop being efficient, and just before photonic devices start being efficient. Okay, so this creates a great opportunity for us to develop a new kind of physics where electronics and photonics, they will need to be merged. So usually this part of the electromagnetic range is referenced as towards the Terence gap because of the lack of sources and the lack of detectors there. No? And I like to see it as the last frontier because we really need to develop solutions as there are many applications waiting for solutions. You have applications in the medical field, and this is because most of the dry dielectrics are going to be transparent at those frequencies, whereas water is going to be very absorbent, for example. Astronomy, you can study the cosmologic background at these frequencies and go back earlier in time, and space is basically vacuum where there is no absorption from water lines. So we can use less sensitive devices and still be able to measure a signal there. Earth sensing by imaging the surface of the Earth, we can maybe detect cavities, information there, and provide better signal for prevision of earthquakes, for example. In biotechnology, people are developing on-chip devices where terahertz light is used to detect the evolution, for example, of the content of a given molecule in a sample. And this is because molecules have vibration modes and rotation modes in the terahertz range. In security, so as I mentioned, a paper is going to be transparent, so if there is a hidden piece of metal or a drug powder hidden in an envelope, without opening it, you could image as well as do spectroscopy on it in order to identify a known content in a non-invasive way. And in industry, it's quite obvious that you can access to quality control It's a non-invasive imaging of, for example, already packaged electronic circuits, and so you can control that metallic connection, for example, is continuous, and so your electronic circuit is going to be fine without damaging the final product. Okay, so the first time I realized that these two worlds need to be reconciliated personally was when I asked myself, how can I miniaturize a photonic device further than the diffraction limit? Okay, and so this is very attractive because that way you could achieve extreme confinement. That would allow for stronger coupling between the cavity mode and resonance in the active region, for example, like an inter-subband transition, as an example. So according to the conditions for the existence of a mode in a photonic resonator, at least one of the dimensions of the cavity should be at least half a wavelength long. That is to say, half an effective wavelength long. Okay, so at the frequency of 3 terahertz, we are talking about a wavelength of 0.1 millimeter, so it's quite large. In this graph, so I reported a few terahertz and mid-infrared cavities that are relevant in terms of low effective volume of the cavity. So maybe you know about photonic crystal laser in the terahertz range. So it's one of the largest devices in this graph. And then here you have the metallic disc that I'm going to talk a little bit about later. And then, of course, you want to go down in this direction. And this is a guide for the eye to let you know where the diffraction limit is. Okay, so you have a terahertz laser that was called the LC laser that lied right on this limit, so it's still diffraction limited. Okay, and an application of the same cavity was made to demonstrate terahertz polaritons. Okay, so the only device that lies in this region is the spacer. And the spacer actually relies on different kinds of physics. It's a plasmonic device. So it's not submitted to this condition. So the question is it possible to have devices here that use a cavity that is similar to a photonic cavity, but that can be so small that the effective volume will be smaller compared to the diffraction limit in 3 dimensions, which means that we will lie in this region where usually electronic devices lie. And if you look at this picture, you will realize that this is an example of an electronic circuit board where you have, here you can recognize an inductor and here some capacitors. And it's probably operating around 300 gigahertz where the wavelength is around 1 meter. And these elements, they are centimeter size. So they are clearly breaking the diffraction limit here. Also, something that's very nice and very important, I think, is to notice that these will manipulate the magnetic field, and this will manipulate the electric field, allowing for an oscillating magnetic field here and an oscillating electric field here, in a completely decoupled way. Whereas in a photonic cavity, usually in a cavity mode, these two fields are linked to each other. You cannot decouple them in space, or you cannot manipulate one of them independently that easily. Okay, and that's very interesting because then if you can do that, you can do impedance matching, you can fine-tune your resonance in a better way. Okay, so this is where, I heard also about metamaterials. And the connection, to me, that was the key. So metamaterials, if you don't know what it is an artificial crystal where we use unit cells that are man-made and we arrange them periodically so that they can mimic a natural crystal. Okay? Because these resonators, they are very small compared to the wavelength of operation. Okay? An incident electromagnetic wave will interact with it as if it was an effective medium with atoms arranged periodically. And we can engineer these artificial atoms such as they have a magnetic moment. For example, here in the case of what we call a split ring resonator, which is a metallic ring with an opening here. So the opening allows for an electric field to be confined here, and the metallic path here allows for the electrons to flow. And so it looks like a small solenoid, if you will. So an electromagnetic wave is going to couple to this resonator if it's sent with the correct K vector, and the magnetic field is going to excite or generate an alternating current at the surface of the metal, and accumulated charges here will generate an alternating electromagnetic field here in the gap. That's why we also like to see that as an LC element, where you have a capacitor coupled to a solenoid, because this inductor here is the value of the inductance is linked to the geometry, and the value of the capacitance is linked to the dimension of the gap here. And it's also interesting to look at Maxwell's local equation for an isolated element. This is the Maxwell locals equation, nothing special about it. But for photonic devices, we usually rely on this term, the displacement. And these particular resonators, for these particular resonators, the first term becomes very important, which is a physical current running there. Okay, this is one of the main characteristics that are kind of new from a photonics point of view. Okay, so how do you use this knowledge and prepare a cavity that you can test whether it can function both as a photonic cavity and an electronic device? So usually these resonators, they are fabricated by defining the geometry of the split ring resonator parallel to the surface of a semiconductor. What we want to do is flip it vertically so that the semiconductor volume can be inserted in the region where the electric field is confined. But if you look at this object, is a 3D object, we work at Terre's frequency, which means the dimensions, they will be micrometer size. And if you want to fabricate this in clean room, it's going to be very hard. So here, a smart way of getting away with this limitation is by looking at the symmetry of this resonator. And you can immediately see that if you would insert an infinite metallic plane right in the middle of this gap, okay, that would be parallel to this XY plane here. Okay, it would create a charge image, okay, that would basically allow you to fabricate a topological equivalent of this object only by building half of it on top of an infinite metallic plane. So we verified this idea with finite element method simulations and fabricated them. And so this slide is showing you experimental results where we compare a traditional patch cavity, which is a circular or a disc that is around 6 microns here in diameter, which is composed of gallium arsenide 1 micron thick layer here that was wafer bonded on top of a metallic plane. And on top of this layer, we defined metallic discs with photolithography, and then we etched, and we ended up with a microdisc. Okay, so simulations, the theory tells you that the fundamental mode is going to look like that. Here we represent the Z component of the electric field, which is the main component because of the condition boundaries here that are metallic. And if you change the diameter, the frequency resonance is going to shift. And so we fabricated arrays of them and we characterized it in reflection. And you can see here each spectra corresponds to a different diameter. So what you can verify is that for a small diameter, the frequency of resonance of this particular mode is around 7 terahertz, and it shifts downwards when the radius is increased. So everything is as expected. Now we simply added a lateral metallic connection on the side to create a topological analog of a split ring resonator. Okay, and it's exactly the same sample. We put it back into clean room and fabricated this extra metallic wire. What it does is it electronically or electrically connects the top metal to the bottom metal, allowing for the path for the electrons to oscillate between this plate, if you will, and the image plate that's a virtual plate that is located 1 micron below the metal. Okay, and so if you do FEM simulations, you find out that there is a new fundamental mode appearing at a lower frequency than this one. And it looks like this, exactly as a fundamental mode in the split ring resonator. So we measure the gain in reflectivity. You can retrieve the diameter here. So first thing you notice is that this mode is splitted now. And this is because this is a defect now that's going to lift the degeneracy of this mode. So now you see a double peak. And it's also predicted in our FEM simulations. And if I would have time, I would show you that we did these measurements in polarization. And each mode can be excited with a particular linear polarization. And so you would see only one mode for, let's say, P polarization, and only the other mode for S polarization. And here you can clearly see the apparition of a new resonance, which is again shifting nicely with the diameter exactly as predicted in the FEM simulations. So in this graph here, I wanted to emphasize the fact that it's subwavelengths in 3 dimensions. So in this graph you can find again the diameter, so every set of points correspond to a particular sample with a different diameter is the only thing that's changing. Okay, and then the green dots here, the triangles represent the two dipolar modes, and as you can see, they lie on this line here where I show the diffraction limit, which is just a guide for the eye, and the fundamental mode is reported with the star points here in green. So you can see they completely break out of the diffraction limit. And we obtain a confinement that's roughly lambda, effective wavelength divided by a factor of 6. Now, we wanted to demonstrate the LC functionalities. So what we did is think how can we increase the path of the electrons without modifying the capacitive element here. So we added a layer of SiO2 and we opened it here and we metallized again. So by doing so, we saw that the fundamental mode would reach a record confinement of effective wavelengths divided by 9. And this is only due to an inductance increase. And then we decided to decrease the capacitance, and so we used a thicker layer of gallium arsenic from 1 micron to 3 micron, and you can see that the fundamental mode resonance is decreased in wavelength again. So showing again this graph, here I've reported the 3 families of devices, and you can see they clearly lie in this region where we wanted to land. Okay, you see the dark green, the red, and the blue. The light green dots that you see here are an application to direct polaritons. So I'm going to show you quickly this result, where basically the layer of gallium arsenic has been replaced with an heterostructure, allowing for intersubband transitions. So this is where, I'm not a quantum physicist, but this is where the quantum part might be found, if you will. So here is a representation of an artificial quantum well. Here we only represent the conduction band of a set of 3 layers. This is typically aluminum gallium arsenide, and this one is gallium arsenic, and again aluminum gallium arsenic. So you can see the band structure here. If the layers are thin enough, then you can start confining energy levels for the electrons in the conduction band. And you can engineer this thickness at will, such that the energy difference between these levels are whatever you need. Okay, so in our case, they're going to be in the range between 10 and 40 millielectron volts, which correspond to terahertz frequencies. So we prepared quantum wells, and we inserted them first in the optical cavity. And because the confinement is already strong, we observed Rabi splitting. For the condition where this transition is very close in energy to the resonant mode in this cavity. So this active region has the particularity to be only active at very low temperature. So here you can see different samples with different diameters, where the temperature is too high for this transition to be observed, so you only see the bare cavity resonance. By lowering the temperature, now we activate this intersubband transition, and you can see the coupling between this transition and this resonance. And you can measure the Rabi splitting here. As was mentioned in the previous talk, a measure of the Rabi splitting, it talks to you about the strength of the coupling between these two systems. So we used the same active region, but instead we inserted it in one of our new resonators. We fabricated different diameters. Here you can see diameter as a function of frequency. And here in blue is reported the energy of the intercept transition. So we selected the diameter 6 micron to increase the coupling between the two systems. And we fabricated it, and this is the result. So as you can see, when we decrease the temperature, the coupling takes place, and we measured an even higher Rabi splitting than in the original system. I don't have time to talk to you about the LR's quantum lasers and the way we can solve Schrödinger equations in these quantum wells and ensure for electronic transport to generate Dirac photons in a cavity and make lasers out of them. I want to mention that we have two posters. One by Alejandro is going to talk about these resonators and how you can make a very simple model to avoid these very time-consuming simulations. And a poster by Ricardo, who is presenting a very smart way of avoiding to have to use two single titanium sapphire oscillators and try and generate a frequency comb in the terahertz range that would be locked to an atomic lock here at CERN. So with this, I thank you for your attention. This is the list of all our collaborators. There are some that are still missing, but we're very happy to have all these collaborators, especially here in Mexico, where funding is limited and you have to be really smart like Ricardo to avoid purchasing two lasers when you can use only one.
I think I would propose that while we set up for the next talk, we have some time for one or two short questions, please. Yes? Okay. Thank you.
I don't want to stand for too long in the way between you and Professor William Phillips.
Thank you for the nice talk. I was curious, how do you generate the terahertz to do the spectroscopy? It looked like you had a source that went up as high as 10 terahertz.
In the reflectivity measurements?
Yes,
That
with
measure-
the
Ah,
plastic
yes.
cavities. What
Mhm.
was-
These measurements were performed in a spectrometer in vacuum condition with a global source. And now we have one here at Sindeslam, and we use a mercury lamp, which gives us a little bit higher intensity in the far infrared. And the detector was a bolometer that was operated at the cryogenic temperature. Okay, to increase the sensitivity.
Is there another question?